Marcus sat in the pilot seat of his cargo freighter and stared at the endless black space ahead of him. 3 months had passed since he last spoke to another living being face to face. The communication log showed only automated responses from space stations and brief cargo confirmations. His own voice sounded strange when he tested the radio each morning. The loneliness had become a physical thing that sat in his chest like a heavy stone. He talked to himself more often now, and sometimes caught himself having full conversations with the ship's computer. The automated voice never answered back with anything more than status reports and navigation data. Nexus Station appeared on his sensors like a dirty smudge against the stars. The place had a reputation that made decent people avoid it when possible. Pirates sold stolen goods there, and slavers moved their cargo through its docking bays. Corrupt officials looked the other way for the right price. Marcus normally would have chosen a different route, but his fuel was running low and his food supplies were almost gone. The station looked like someone had welded together old ship hulls and forgotten to make it pretty. Rust streaks ran down its metal sides, and several of the docking lights flickered with broken connections. The air inside tasted stale and recycled too many times. Strange smells drifted through the corridors that Marcus did not want to identify. He completed his cargo delivery to a merchant who counted credits twice and asked no questions about where the goods came from. The man paid in cash and disappeared into the crowd before Marcus could ask for a receipt. That was how business worked on Nexus Station. Marcus walked through the main marketplace afterward and tried to ignore the things being sold in the darker corners. Weapons that looked military-grade sat next to boxes of medical supplies with hospital markings still visible. A group of rough-looking aliens huddled around something in a cage, but Marcus kept walking when he heard soft crying sounds coming from inside. He stopped at a bar called The Void and ordered something that might have been alcohol. The bartender was a 4-armed creature who spoke in grunts and pointed at prices written on a dirty board. The drink burned his throat, but it was better than the recycled water on his ship. A human man sat down beside him without being invited. He wore expensive clothes that looked out of place in the grimy bar. His smile showed too many teeth, and his eyes moved constantly like he expected trouble from any direction. "You look like a man who spends too much time alone," the stranger said. His voice had the smooth quality of someone who made his living talking people into bad decisions. Marcus turned to look at him but said nothing. The man continued anyway. "Name's Voss, and I might have something that could help with that problem. You run cargo routes, right? Long hauls between systems." "Maybe," Marcus replied. He had learned to be careful about giving information to strangers, especially on places like Nexus Station. Voss laughed like Marcus had made a joke. "Friend, you look like you haven't had a real conversation in months. I can see it in your eyes." The deep space madness creeps up on a man slow, but always gets there eventually. Marcus felt uncomfortable because the man was right. The isolation was affecting him more than he wanted to admit. Sometimes he forgot what day it was or found himself staring at the same star chart for hours without reason. "What are you selling?" Marcus asked. "Companionship," Voss said, and pulled out a small display tablet. "I deal in high-end companion androids. Top-of-the-line artificial intelligence with full personality programming. Beautiful, intelligent, and completely loyal. They're designed to provide conversation, emotional support, and whatever other services a lonely spacer might need." The tablet showed pictures of various android models. They all looked perfect in the way that artificial things try to copy real beauty, but never quite achieved it. The prices were listed below each image, and Marcus winced when he saw the numbers. "I can't afford anything like that," he said and started to turn away. Voss grabbed his arm gently. "Wait, friend. I might have something special for someone in your situation. I've got one unit that's been giving me some problems. Nothing serious, but the personality programming is a bit different from standard models. I need to move it quick, and I'm willing to let it go for a fraction of the usual price." Marcus looked at the man's face and saw the desperation hiding behind the sales smile. Whatever he was trying to sell was probably stolen or broken in ways that would cause problems later. But the loneliness in Marcus's chest ached worse than his common sense. "How much?" he asked. Voss named a price that was still high, but not impossible. Marcus had been saving credits for months because there was nothing to spend money on during the long hauls between systems. The amount would take most of his savings, but it would not leave him completely broke. What kind of problems are we talking about? Marcus asked. Nothing that would affect basic functions, Voss said, quickly. Just some personality quirks that make it different from the standard models. Some buyers find it too enthusiastic or emotional. But for someone who's been alone as long as you have, that might actually be a good thing. Marcus stared at his drink and thought about the endless months of silence stretching ahead of him. The ship's computer voice was starting to sound like an old friend, and that was not a good sign. He had heard stories about spacers who went completely insane from isolation and were found weeks later talking to cargo containers they had named and dressed up like people. If I buy this thing, and it doesn't work the way you say, well, I'm coming back here to find you, Marcus said. Voss's smile became more genuine. Fair enough, friend, but I think you're going to be very satisfied with this purchase. The unit has some special features that aren't available in standard models. They completed the transaction in a small office behind the bar. Voss took Marcus's credits and handed him a data pad with shipping information. The android would be delivered to his ship within the hour in a standard transport container. One more thing, Voss said as Marcus prepared to leave. The activation codes are a bit different from normal. Don't try to power it up until you're well away from the station. The unit needs time to calibrate to its new environment. Marcus nodded and walked back toward the docking bay where his ship waited. He felt strange about the purchase, like he had just made a decision that would change his life in ways he could not predict. The rational part of his mind said he had just been cheated by a smooth-talking criminal, but the lonely part of his mind was already imagining conversations with someone who would actually talk back. His ship looked the same as always when he returned, but somehow it felt different knowing that soon he would not be alone inside its metal walls. The cargo bay was large enough to store the transport container until he was ready to deal with whatever was inside it. The delivery arrived exactly when promised. 2 dock workers brought a sealed container that was larger than Marcus had expected and heavier too based on how much effort it took them to load it onto his ship. They left without saying anything after he signed the delivery receipt. Marcus sealed the cargo bay and ran through his pre-flight checks with more energy than he had felt in weeks. The prospect of companionship, even artificial companionship, made the routine tasks seem less tedious. He cleared the station and jumped to hyperspace as quickly as possible. 3 hours later, when he was safely away from Nexus Station and any potential complications, Marcus went to cargo bay to examine his purchase. The container was plain metal with standard shipping markings and a simple electronic lock. The activation codes from Voss opened it without any problems. Inside was not an android at all, but a living, breathing person. She was tall and slender with skin that seemed to have a faint glow beneath its surface. Strange markings ran along her arms like tattoos, but they pulsed with soft light, as if they were alive. Her hair was long and dark, and her eyes were the deepest blue Marcus had ever seen. She was definitely not human, but she was also definitely not an android. Her chest rose and fell with steady breathing, and when she opened her eyes, they focused on Marcus with unmistakable intelligence and awareness. Instead of fear or anger being trapped in a shipping container, her face lit up with pure joy. She sat up quickly and began speaking in a language Marcus did not recognize. Her voice was musical and excited, like someone greeting an old friend after a long separation. When she realized he could not understand her, she switched to Broken Galactic Standard. Thank you so much," she said, and her accent made the word sound like a song. "I am Kira, and I am so happy to meet you. You saved me from a terrible place." Marcus stared at her in shock. He had expected to unpack an android, and instead found himself looking at an alien woman who seemed genuinely grateful to see him. The joy in her eyes was so bright it made his chest feel warm for the first time in months. "I think there's been some kind of mistake," he said slowly. "I bought you from a man named Voss on Nexus Station. He said you were an android companion." Kira's expression became sad for a moment, but then brightened again. "No mistake," she said. "Bad men sell me like thing instead of person. But you seem kind, and I am happy to be here with you, instead of in dark place waiting for worse buyer." Marcus realized he had stumbled into something far more complicated than a simple purchase. But looking at Kira's hopeful face, he found he did not want to return her to the nightmare she had apparently escaped from. The loneliness that had been eating at him for months seemed to fade just from having someone else alive and breathing in the same space. "Well," he said finally, "I guess we should figure out what happens next." Kira smiled, and the markings on her arms pulsed brighter. "Yes," she said, "I think this will be very good for both of us." Marcus gave Kira the small spare cabin that he had been using for storage. She examined everything with the curiosity of someone seeing a human ship for the first time. Her fingers traced the control panels and wall displays, while her luminescent markings pulsed in patterns that seemed to match her emotions. "This is much better than Cage," she said as she sat on a narrow bunk. "Thank you for giving me a safe place." Marcus brought her food from his emergency supplies and watched as she ate with obvious hunger. She had been given very little to eat wherever she came from, and her body showed signs of poor treatment. But her spirits remained high, and she smiled at him between bites. "Can you tell me what happened to you?" Marcus asked. "How did you end up being sold on Nexus Station?" Kira's markings dimmed and her expression became sad. She set down the food and looked at her hands for a long moment before speaking. "I am Luminari," she said. "My people come from a beautiful world with 3 suns and crystal cities that sing in the wind. We are different from most species because we cannot live alone for long periods. We need connection with others or we become sick and die." Marcus leaned forward in his chair. He had never heard of the Luminari before, but the galaxy was vast and held many species that humans had not yet encountered. "The hegemony came to our world 6 months ago," Kira continued. "They are an empire that conquers planets and enslaves populations. They study each species to find weaknesses they can exploit. When they learned that Luminari need emotional bonds to survive, they decided this made us perfect slaves." Her markings flashed angry red for a moment before returning to their usual soft blue glow. "They separated us from our families and kept us in isolation cells. They wanted to break our spirits so we would be easier to control. Many of my people died from the loneliness before they could be sold. I was lucky because I am strong and lasted longer than most." Marcus felt anger building in his chest as he listened to her story. The idea of deliberately torturing people by denying them companionship seemed especially cruel to him. He had experienced loneliness during his cargo runs, but he had chosen that life. Having it forced on someone as a form of torture was something else entirely. "The hegemony sells us to buyers who want workers that will never rebel or cause problems," Kira said. "Lonely Luminari lose the will to fight and do whatever they are told. But sometimes buyers want us for other purposes." She shuddered, and Marcus did not ask for details about what those other purposes might be. "How did you end up with us?" he asked instead. "I was being transported to a buyer who wanted Luminari for experiments. He wanted to study our bonding abilities to create weapons. But ship had mechanical problems and stopped at Nexus Station for repairs. Voss bribed guards to let him take me. He planned to sell me as exotic companion to wealthy buyer." Kira looked at Marcus with gratitude shining in her eyes. "But you bought me instead, and you treat me with kindness. Already I feel stronger just from having someone to talk to. My people heal quickly when we have emotional connections." As if to prove her point, the markings on her arms grew brighter, and some of the stress lines around her eyes seemed to fade. Marcus spent the next few days learning about Kira and her species, while they traveled to his next cargo pickup. She was intelligent and curious about everything on the ship. She learned to operate basic systems within hours, and soon was helping him with routine maintenance tasks. Her presence changed the entire feel of the ship. The silence that had oppressed Marcus for months was replaced by conversation and laughter. Kira had a sense of humor that caught him off guard, and she seemed to find joy in small things like watching stars through the observation port or tasting different human foods. But Marcus also noticed that her abilities went far beyond simple companionship. When he mentioned having trouble sleeping because of stress headaches, she asked if she could help. Her touch on his forehead sent waves of calm through his entire body, and the pain disappeared completely. "How did you do that?" he asked in amazement. "Luminari can share strength and healing with those we bond with," she explained. "It is natural ability that helps families and communities support each other. When we form deep connections, we can ease each other's pain and share our life energy. Marcus realized this explained why the hegemony had been interested in experimenting on her people. An ability to heal and strengthen others could be incredibly valuable if it could be weaponized somehow. Over the following weeks, their bond deepened in ways that surprised Marcus. He found himself able to sense her emotions even when they were in different parts of the ship. When she was happy, his own mood lifted, and when she was sad, he felt the urge to comfort her. The connection was unlike anything he had ever experienced with another person. Kira seemed to be changing too. Her markings grew brighter and more complex, with new patterns appearing along her shoulders and neck. She moved with more confidence, and her galactic standard improved rapidly, as if her mind was working faster than before. Bonding makes both parties stronger, she explained when Marcus asked about the changes. You give me emotional stability and companionship. In return, I can share healing and enhance intuition with you. It is partnership that benefits everyone involved. Marcus discovered what she meant about enhanced intuition during a routine cargo delivery. They were approaching a space station that looked normal on all sensors, but something felt wrong to him in a way he could not explain. The feeling was strong enough that he decided to scan more carefully before docking. The additional scans revealed that the station was broadcasting false identification codes and was actually a pirate base. Marcus changed course quickly and reported the location to local authorities. The quick thinking probably saved their lives and cargo. How did you know something was wrong? Kira asked afterward. I don't know, Marcus admitted. It was just a feeling that something was not right. Kira smiled, and her markings pulsed with satisfaction. The bond lets you access some of my intuitive abilities. Luminari are very good at sensing deception and danger. Now you can sense it too. Marcus began to understand that his relationship with Kira was more than just companionship. They were becoming partners in a way that enhanced both of their natural abilities. His human determination and protective instincts seemed to strengthen her healing powers, while her intuitive gifts helped him navigate dangerous situations with unprecedented accuracy. But their growing bond also brought new concerns. During a stop at a legitimate trading post, Marcus noticed other spacers looking at Kira with interest that made him uncomfortable. Her exotic appearance and obvious non-human features drew attention wherever they went. A merchant approached them while they were purchasing supplies and made an offer to buy Kira for an amount that would have made Marcus wealthy. The man's eyes had the same predatory look that Marcus remembered from Voss back on Nexus Station. She's not for sale, Marcus said firmly and put himself between Kira and the merchant. The man laughed, but his expression remained calculating. Everything has a price, friend. That's a rare specimen you have there. Worth a fortune to the right collector. Marcus felt anger flare in his chest and noticed that Kira's markings had turned deep red with distress. The bond between them carried her fear directly into his emotions, and his protective instincts responded with surprising intensity. I said she's not for sale, Marcus repeated, and his hand moved toward the pistol on his belt. The merchant raised his hands and backed away, but his smile never wavered. No offense intended, but you might want to be careful traveling with something so valuable. Word get around about interesting cargo, and not everyone will be as polite as me about making offers. After the merchant left, Marcus realized that their situation was more dangerous than he had thought. Kira was not just his companion, but potentially valuable property in the eyes of people who saw other beings as things to be bought and sold. We need to be more careful, he told her as they returned to their ship. There are people who would try to take you away from me. Kira nodded, but she did not seem afraid. Instead, her markings pulsed with determination. I will not go back to Cage, she said, and I will not let anyone separate us. The bond we share makes us both stronger, and I will fight to protect it. Marcus felt her resolve through their connection, and realized that she was not the helpless victim he had first thought. The Luminari might need emotional bonds to survive, but that did not make them weak. In fact, their ability to share strength and healing with trusted partners might make them formidable when they had someone to fight for. As they left the trading post behind, Marcus began to think about their future together. He had started his journey as a lonely cargo hauler, looking for artificial companionship. Instead, he had found a real partnership with someone who enhanced his abilities while depending on him for protection and emotional support. The bond between them was still growing stronger each day, and Marcus wondered what other abilities might develop as their connection deepened. He was beginning to understand that humans and Luminari might be uniquely compatible in ways that could benefit both species. But he was also becoming aware that their partnership represented something that powerful people might want to control or destroy. The hegemony was still out there looking for escaped Luminari slaves, and there were others who would see Kira as valuable property rather than a person with rights and feelings. Marcus made a decision as he plotted their course for the next destination. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would not let anyone take Kira away from him or force her back into captivity. The bond they shared had given him purpose beyond just earning credits and surviving another day. He was no longer just a cargo hauler drifting through space alone. He was half of a partnership that was becoming something greater than the sum of its parts, and he would do whatever it took to protect that. Marcus woke to the sound of alarms screaming through his ship. The proximity sensors were flashing red warnings, and Kira was already sitting up in her bunk with her markings pulsing urgent orange patterns. 3 ships approaching fast, she said before Marcus could check the scanner readings. They feel wrong. Dangerous. Marcus ran to the bridge and saw the sensor display, showing 3 military vessels closing on their position. The ships were sleek and predatory, looking with weapon arrays that could reduce his cargo freighter to scrap metal in seconds. "This is Commander Thale of the Hegemony Third Fleet." A cold voice came through the communication system. "Cargo vessel prepare to be boarded for inspection. Do not attempt to flee, or you will be destroyed." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. The hegemony had found them somehow despite all their precautions. He looked at Kira, who had joined him on the bridge, and saw fear in her eyes for the first time since he had known her. "They came for me," she whispered. "I am sorry, Marcus. I brought this danger to you." "We're not giving up yet," Marcus said, and his hands moved over control panels. "Hold on." He pushed the engines to maximum power and changed course toward a nearby asteroid field. The move caught the hegemony ships off guard and bought them a few precious minutes before the pursuit began in earnest. "Cargo vessel, you are harboring stolen property." Commander Thale's voice came again. "Return the Luminari female, and your crimes will be overlooked." Marcus switched off the communicator without responding. He had no intention of handing Kira over people who treated living beings as property to be bought and sold. The asteroid field provided some cover, but the hegemony ships were faster and better armed than his freighter. Energy blasts lit up the space around them as the enemy tried to disable their engines without destroying the ship completely. "They want to take me alive," Kira said. "They will not risk killing me with their weapons." Marcus used this knowledge to his advantage and flew deeper into the asteroid field where the larger hegemony ships could not follow as easily. But he knew they could not hide forever, and eventually they would run out of fuel or make a mistake that would end their escape. "There," Kira pointed to a sensor reading. "Fuel depot on asteroid. We can refuel and maybe find help." The depot was little more than a collection of storage tanks and docking platforms carved into the surface of a large asteroid. It looked barely operational, but Marcus was desperate enough to try anything. He brought the ship in for landing while energy blasts from pursuing vessels lit up the rock around them. The depot's automated systems responded to his docking request, and fuel lines connected to his ship's tanks. "This will take 10 minutes, Marcus said as he watched the fuel gauge slowly climb. "They'll be here before then." A group of rough-looking humans and aliens emerged from the depot's main building. They were armed with military-grade weapons and moved with the coordination of experienced fighters. Marcus expected them to demand payment or threaten to turn him over to the hegemony for a reward. Instead, their leader walked up to his ship and spoke through the external communicator. "You folks seem to be in some trouble with those hegemony bastards," the man said. His voice carried the accent of the Outer Rim colonies. "Name's Jake, and we don't much care for the hegemony around here." Marcus opened the ship's cargo bay and stepped out with Kira beside him. The depot workers looked at her with interest, but not the predatory hunger he had seen from slavers and collectors. "They want to take her back into slavery," Marcus explained quickly. "She's Luminari, and they're hunting her species." Jake's expression darkened. "Yeah, we heard about what happened to the Luminari homeworld. Hegemony has been grabbing up survivors wherever they can find them." The hegemony ships appeared over the asteroid's horizon like deadly shadows against the stars. Their weapons were charging for another attack run. "You got two choices," Jake said. "Hide here and hope they don't find you, or make a run for it with our help." "What kind of help?" Marcus asked. Jake smiled and gestured toward what Marcus had thought were storage buildings. Hidden doors opened to reveal weapons emplacements and defensive systems. The fuel depot was actually a disguised military base. "We're part of something bigger," Jake explained. "Network of folks who don't appreciate the hegemony's expansion policies. We help people who are running from their kind of justice." The hegemony ships opened fire on the asteroid surface, and energy beams carved glowing scars in the rock. The hidden weapon systems responded immediately with defensive fire that forced the attackers to pull back. "Your ship's fueled," Jake said. "Follow the navigation beacon. We're sending you. It'll take you to people who can help you disappear." Marcus felt grateful beyond words, but he also felt guilty about bringing danger to these people who were trying to help them. "They'll destroy this place because of us," he said. Jake laughed and patted him on the shoulder. "Friend, this place has been marked for destruction since the day we started helping hegemony refugees. We knew this day would come eventually." The weapons battle continued overhead as Marcus and Kira prepared to launch. The depot's defenses were holding for now, but Marcus could see more hegemony ships approaching in the distance. "Thank you," Kira said to Jake before they boarded their ship. "You risk much to help strangers." "Everyone deserves to be free," Jake replied. "And the hegemony needs to learn that some people will fight back." Marcus launched his ship during a lull in the fighting and followed the navigation beacon toward coordinates that would take them deeper into the Outer Rim territories. Behind them, the battle continued, and he hoped Jake and his people would survive what was coming. "The beacon leads to Sector 7, Marcus said as he studied the navigation display. "That's frontier territory. Barely any law enforcement and lots of places to hide." Kira was quiet for several minutes as they traveled. Her markings had returned to their normal blue glow, but Marcus could sense her troubled emotions through their bond. "I brought death to good people," she said finally. "Jake and others will suffer because they helped us." Marcus reached over and took her hand. The contact sent waves of comfort through both of them as their bond shared strength and support. "They chose to help us," he said, "and they knew the risks. People like Jake fight the hegemony because someone has to stand up to bullies. Your species does this often," Kira observed. "Humans fight for others even when it brings danger to themselves." Marcus thought about that as they continued their journey. Humans did seem to have a tendency to get involved in other people's problems even when the smart thing would be to mind their own business. "Maybe we're just too stubborn to know when to quit," he said. The navigation beacon led them to a small outpost built inside a hollowed-out asteroid. The place looked abandoned from the outside, but docking lights activated when they approached, and a voice guided them to a landing bay. The bay was larger than it appeared from outside and contained several other ships that looked like they belonged to refugees or smugglers. Armed guards watched as Marcus and Kira disembarked, but their weapons were not pointed in a threatening manner. A woman approached them with the confident stride of someone in charge. She was tall and lean with scars on her face that spoke of past battles. Her clothing was practical rather than decorative, and she carried herself like a soldier. "I'm Anna," she said. "Jake sent word that you were coming, and that you had hegemony hunters on your trail." "They're after her," Marcus said and indicated Kira. "She's escaped Luminari, and they want her back." Anna looked at Kira with professional interest. "We've helped other Luminari refugees, but you're the first one who looks healthy and strong. Most of them are barely alive when they reach us." "I was fortunate," Kira said. "Marcus found me before the worst could happen, and we have formed a bond that gives me strength." Anna's eyebrows rose with surprise. "You bonded with a human? That's unusual. Most rescued Luminari are too traumatized to form new connections for months or years." "Marcus is different," Kira said, and her markings pulsed with warmth. "He treats me as equal partner, not as property or burden." Anna studied them both for a moment, and Marcus got the feeling she was evaluating them for something more than just refuge. "The hegemony is getting more aggressive about hunting down escaped Luminari," she said. They've been experimenting with your people's abilities, and they don't want to lose valuable test subjects. Marcus felt anger building in his chest at the casual way she described the torture and experimentation that Kira's people had endured. What kind of experiments? He asked. They're trying to weaponize the bonding abilities. Anna explained. Force Luminari to bond with hegemony soldiers to create enhanced troops. So far they haven't had much success because the bonds require genuine emotional connection. Kira's markings flashed red with rage. They try to corrupt our most sacred ability and turn it into a tool for conquest. Anna nodded grimly, which is why we need to stop them, and why you two might be exactly what we've been looking for. She gestured for them to follow her deeper into the outpost. The corridors were carved from solid rock and lined with equipment that looked both civilian and military in nature. What do you mean? Marcus asked. You've achieved something that we thought was impossible, Anna said. A human Luminari bond that makes both parties stronger. We have other Luminari here, but none of them have been able to form new connections since their rescue. They entered a large chamber that served as a meeting hall. Several dozen people of various species were gathered around tables covered with maps and technical displays. Marcus realized he was looking at the command center of a resistance organization. If we could help other Luminari form healing bonds with willing partners, we could create teams that are stronger than anything the hegemony has. Anna continued. Teams that could actually fight back instead of just running and hiding. Marcus looked at Kira and saw determination replacing the fear in her eyes. Her markings were pulsing with patterns he had never seen before. There are others of my people here? She asked. 7 survivors, Anna confirmed. All of them damaged by what they experienced, but still alive. Maybe seeing you healthy and bonded will give them hope that recovery is possible. Marcus realized that their escape from the hegemony had led them to something much larger than just finding a place to hide. They had found people who were actively fighting back against the empire that had destroyed Kira's world and enslaved her people. What would you need us to do? He asked. Anna smiled for the first time since they had met her. Help us turn refugees into fighters. Show other humans and Luminari that partnership is possible. And maybe help us hit the hegemony where it hurts most. Marcus felt Kira's excitement through their bond and realized that running and hiding was not going to be enough for either of them. The hegemony would keep hunting Luminari survivors and enslaving other species until someone stood up to them with enough force to make them stop. When do we start? He asked. Anna led Marcus and Kira through the carved corridors to a section of the base that felt different from the military command areas. The walls here were painted in soft colors, and the lighting was warmer. The air carried scents of growing things, and Marcus could hear the sound of running water somewhere nearby. We call this the healing wing, Anna explained. The Luminari survivors need a peaceful environment to recover from their trauma. Most of them have been here for months, but they still show signs of severe psychological damage. They entered a large common room with comfortable seating areas and windows that showed holographic views of natural landscapes. 7 Luminari sat scattered around the room, but none of them were interacting with each other. Their markings were dim, and their movements seemed slow and careful, like people who expected pain at any moment. When Kira walked into the room, the change was immediate and dramatic. All 7 survivors looked up at once, and their markings began to pulse with faint light. One of them stood up slowly and took a hesitant step forward. Sister, she whispered in the Luminari language, you shine so bright. How is this possible? Kira approached her carefully and spoke in soothing tones. Marcus could not understand the words, but he could feel the emotional resonance through his bond with Kira. She was projecting feelings of safety and hope that seemed to wash over the entire room. The other survivors began to move closer, drawn by something they had not felt since their capture. Their markings grew brighter as they gathered around Kira, and Marcus saw tears running down several faces. They have not responded to anyone like this since they arrived, Anna said quietly. We have human counselors and medical staff, but nothing we tried could reach them. One of the survivors reached out tentatively and touched Kira's arm. The contact sent visible waves of light through both their marking patterns, and the survivor gasped as if she had been holding her breath for months. The bond, she said in accented galactic standard. I can feel it through you. The connection to another being who cares. I have forgotten what it felt like. More survivors joined the contact, and soon all 7 were connected in a circle with Kira at the center. Their combined markings created patterns of light that filled the room with gentle radiance. Marcus felt the emotional energy through his connection to Kira, and it was like standing in warm sunlight after months of cold darkness. "How are they doing this?" Marcus asked Anna. "Luminari can share emotional energy when they're in groups," she replied. "But these survivors were too damaged to connect with each other before. Kira is acting like a bridge that lets them access abilities they thought they'd lost forever." The healing session continued for over an hour. When it finally ended, the 7 survivors looked different. Their posture was straighter, and their eyes held light that had been missing before. They were still damaged by their experiences, but they were no longer broken. "Thank you, sister," one of them said to Kira. "You have reminded us that we are still alive." Over the following days, Marcus watched as Kira worked with the other survivors to rebuild their capacity for emotional connection. She spent hours in meditation circles sharing strength and hope through the Luminari group bonding process. The improvement in their condition was remarkable, and word of their recovery spread throughout the resistance base. Anna called Marcus to a private meeting in her office, while Kira was conducting another healing session. "Your partner is performing miracles," she said. "Those 7 Luminari were barely functional when they arrived. Now they are talking about wanting to help with resistance operations." Marcus nodded, but he also felt concerned about the pressure being placed on Kira. "She gives so much of herself to help them. I can feel how drained she becomes after each session." "That's where you come in," Anna said. "The bond between you and Kira provides a constant source of renewal for her abilities. Without that connection, she would not be able to sustain the healing work she is doing." Marcus was beginning to understand the true significance of human Luminari bonding. Humans seemed uniquely suited to provide the kind of steady emotional support that allowed Luminari to use their abilities without exhausting themselves. "We want to try something," Anna continued. "We have human volunteers who are willing to attempt bonding with the recovered Luminari. If we can create more partnerships like yours, we could have the foundation for a real fighting force." The bonding experiments began the following week. Marcus and Kira worked with pairs of humans and Luminari to guide them through the process of forming emotional connections. It was delicate work that required patience and trust from both parties. The first successful bond formed between a human engineer named Tom and a Luminari female called Nira. Tom had lost his family in a hegemony raid and carried deep anger about the Empire's brutality. Nira had been experimented on by hegemony scientists and bore both physical and emotional scars from her ordeal. When their bond finally clicked into place, the change was visible to everyone watching. Tom's anger transformed into protective determination, while Nira's fear became focused resolve. Together they seemed to radiate a sense of purpose that neither had possessed alone. "It feels like I've been incomplete my whole life," Tom said afterward. "Now I understand what I was missing." Nira smiled, and her markings pulsed with contentment. "The pain is still there, but it no longer controls me. Through Tom's strength, I can remember who I was before the darkness." More successful bonds formed over following weeks. A human pilot named Lisa connected with a Luminari male called Zex, who had been a musician before his capture. A former soldier named Rick bonded with Mila, who had been a teacher on the Luminari homeworld. Each bonded pair developed abilities that exceeded what either individual could achieve alone. The humans gained enhanced intuition and reflexes, while the Luminari recovered their capacity for healing and emotional support. Together, they began training for combat operations against hegemony targets. Marcus found himself appointed as an unofficial leader of the bonded teams despite having no military training. His partnership with Kira had become the template that others tried to follow, and his natural protective instincts seemed to inspire confidence in the other humans. Leadership is not about knowing all the answers, Anna told him during one of their planning sessions. It's about helping people find their own strength and giving them a cause worth fighting for. The first real test of their abilities came when intelligence reports indicated that a hegemony prison ship was transporting captured Luminari through a nearby system. The ship carried over 40 prisoners who were being taken to research facilities for experimentation. Anna proposed a rescue mission using the bonded teams. The operation would be dangerous and could result in heavy casualties, but would also save dozens of Luminari lives and strike a significant blow against hegemony operations. Marcus gathered the 6 bonded pairs for a mission briefing. Looking at their faces, he saw determination mixed with nervousness. These people had been refugees and survivors just weeks ago, and now they were preparing to attack one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. The prison ship has heavy shields and weapon systems, he explained while studying the tactical displays. But it also has a weakness. Hegemony crews are trained to fight individual opponents, not coordinated teams that can anticipate each other's actions. Through his bond with Kira, Marcus could sense the emotional state of all the Luminari in the room. Their fear was balanced by excitement at the prospect of rescuing their people. The humans showed similar mixed emotions, but their protective instincts were overriding their concerns about personal safety. "We will not abandon our people to torment," Zek said, and his bonded partner Lisa nodded agreement. "Even if the risk is great, we must try." The other pairs voiced similar sentiments, and Marcus felt pride in their courage. These were ordinary people who had found extraordinary strength through their connections to each other. The rescue mission launched 3 days later using a combination of stealth ships and surprise tactics. Marcus and Kira led one team while the other bonded pairs split up to handle different aspects of the operation. The initial approach went perfectly. The prison ship's sensors failed to detect the small stealth vessels until they were already within weapons range. The hegemony crew responded with typical military precision, but they were not prepared for opponents who seemed to move with shared consciousness. Tom and Nira disabled the ship's weapon systems, while Rick and Mila took control of the bridge. Lisa and Zex led the assault on the prison sections where the Luminari captives were being held. Each team moved with coordination that looked almost supernatural to outside observers. Marcus and Kira served as mobile support, moving between teams to provide healing and tactical guidance. Through their bond, Marcus could maintain awareness of all the other operations happening simultaneously on the ship. The hegemony crew fought back with desperate fury, but they were overwhelmed by opponents who anticipated their moves and supported each other in ways that defied military logic. Within 2 hours, the prison ship was under resistance control, and 43 Luminari prisoners were free. The rescued Luminari were in poor condition after months of imprisonment and experimentation. Many showed signs of severe trauma similar to what the original 7 survivors had experienced. But the presence of healthy bonded pairs gave them hope that recovery was possible. "This is just the beginning," Anna said as they returned to the base with their rescued people. "Word of this victory will spread throughout the Resistance network. Other cells will want to know how we achieved such success with minimal casualties." Marcus looked at the reunited Luminari families and felt satisfaction deeper than anything he had experienced during his years as a lonely cargo hauler. The bond with Kira had given him purpose beyond simply surviving from one day to the next. "The hegemony will respond to this," Kira said as she worked to heal the worst injured of the rescued prisoners. "They will send more ships and stronger forces to hunt us." Marcus nodded, but he was not afraid. The bonded teams had proven themselves in combat, and their success would inspire others to join the resistance. What had started as a simple rescue operation was growing into something that could challenge the hegemony's control over entire sectors. "Let them come," he said. "We have something they do not understand and cannot duplicate. We have people who choose to fight for each other instead of being forced to fight for conquest." The rescued Luminari were already showing signs of improvement as they reconnected with their own people and witnessed the bonds between humans and Luminari. Marcus realized that every person they saved made the resistance stronger and gave hope to others who were still trapped under hegemony control. The war against the Empire had truly begun, and humanity had found its role as the partners and protectors that could help other species reclaim their freedom. 6 months after the first rescue mission, Marcus stood on the bridge of the Resistance flagship, watching as dozens of ships gathered in the shadow of a massive asteroid. What had begun as a small group of survivors had grown into a fleet that represented hope for oppressed species across 3 sectors of space. The ship around him hummed with activity as crews prepared for the largest operation in Resistance history. Human voices mixed with the musical tones of Luminari speech and the varied sounds of a dozen other species who had joined their cause. But it was the bonds between humans and Luminari that formed the backbone of their fighting force. Final count shows 87 bonded pairs ready for combat, Anna reported as she joined Marcus at the observation window, plus support crews from 12 different worlds that had declared independence from hegemony rule. Marcus nodded while reviewing the tactical displays. The enemy force they would face was 3 times larger than anything they had fought before. Commander Thale had assembled a full battle fleet with orders to crush the resistance once and for all. Are you ready for this? Kira asked as she placed her hand on his shoulder. Her touch sent waves of calm strength through their bond, and Marcus felt his nervousness transform into focused determination. As ready as anyone can be for something like this, he replied. Though I still can't believe we went from hiding in asteroid fields to commanding a rebel fleet. Kira smiled and her markings pulsed with warm light. You underestimate what humans can accomplish when they decide to protect others. Your species has a gift for turning impossible situations into victories. The communication system activated, and Anna's voice reached every ship in the fleet. All crews prepare for final jump to the target system. Remember that we fight not just for ourselves, but for everyone who dreams of freedom from hegemony oppression. Marcus took his position at the tactical station, while Kira moved to the coordination center, where she could maintain contact with all the other Luminari in the fleet. Through their bond, she could share information and emotional support across vast distances in ways that gave their forces unprecedented unity. The jump to hyperspace felt different this time. Instead of the usual isolation that came with faster-than-light travel, Marcus could sense the presence of every bonded pair in the fleet. The Luminari had found a way to maintain their connections even across the strange dimensions of hyperspace, and the entire fleet moved with shared purpose. They dropped back into normal space at the edge of the hegemony's stronghold system and immediately faced a sight that Marcus had been dreading. Over 200 enemy ships waited in battle formation around the heavily fortified world of Corax Prime. The planet served as a major hegemony administrative center and processing facility for enslaved populations. Sensors show massive prison complexes on the surface, the tactical officer reported. Estimated 15,000 captives from over 30 species, including nearly 300 Luminari. Marcus felt anger surge through the fleet's collective consciousness as every bonded pair reacted to the news. The hegemony had turned an entire world into a slave processing center, and the Resistance fleet was the only force in position to do anything about it. Commander Thale is hailing us, the communications officer announced. The main screen flickered to life, showing the cold face of the hegemony officer who had been hunting them since their escape from Nexus Station. His expression showed the arrogant confidence of someone who believed victory was assured. Resistance fleet, you are outnumbered and outgunned, Thale said. Surrender now, and I will guarantee that your human crews receive quick deaths. The Luminari will be returned to proper custody for re-education. Marcus activated the reply channel and felt the support of every person in the fleet flowing through his connection to Kira. Commander Thale, he said calmly, you're about to learn why the hegemony's reign of terror is coming to an end. We're not here to surrender. We're here to free every slave on that planet and show the galaxy that your empire can be beaten. Thale's face twisted with rage. You pathetic rebels have no idea what you're facing. I have enough firepower to reduce your entire fleet to debris. Maybe, Marcus replied, but you have one problem that all your weapons and numbers can't solve. Your crews fight because they're ordered to. Ours fight because they choose to. The communication cut off, and both fleets began moving toward combat positions. The hegemony ships advanced in perfect military formation, while the resistance vessels moved in flowing patterns that seemed almost organic in their coordination. The battle began when the first hegemony ships came within weapons range. Energy beams and missile salvos lit up the darkness between the opposing forces. But something unexpected happened that caught the hegemony crews completely off guard. The resistance ships seemed to know exactly where enemy fire would be concentrated before the weapons were even aimed. Bonded crews moved their vessels with precision that looked impossible to outside observers. Ships that should have been destroyed by overwhelming firepower slipped to attack patterns like they could see the future. How are they doing that? Thale demanded of his tactical officers as resistance ships avoided shot after shot that should have been direct hits. What the hegemony commander did not understand was that the Luminari bonding network allowed the entire Resistance fleet to share sensory information and intuitive insights in real time. Every pilot could feel the intentions of enemy gunners through the collective consciousness of their Luminari partners. The first hegemony ships began falling to Resistance fire as the bonded crews coordinated attacks with devastating precision. Where the enemy expected individual ship actions, they faced fleet-wide tactical movements that no single commander could have planned. Marcus watched from the flagship bridge as Tom and Neera's ship executed an impossible maneuver that brought them behind 3 enemy vessels simultaneously. Their weapons' fire was perfectly timed to hit weak points in. The hegemony shields in all 3 ships exploded within seconds of each other. "Impossible," the tactical officer whispered. "No pilot has reflexes that good." "They're not relying on individual reflexes," Marcus explained. "They're fighting as a single organism with dozens of minds working together." The battle continued for 3 hours, and the tide gradually turned in favor of the Resistance fleet. Hegemony ships that had never faced coordinated opposition found themselves overwhelmed by tactics they could not counter or predict. Commander Thale tried increasingly desperate measures, including ordering his ships to ram Resistance vessels in suicide attacks. But even these moves were anticipated by the bonded crews, who seemed to sense the enemy's intentions before they were fully formed. "Sir," Thale's communications officer reported with barely controlled panic, "we've lost over 60% of our fleet. The remaining ships are requesting permission to withdraw." Thale stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His overwhelming numerical advantage had been reduced to nothing by an enemy force that fought unlike anything in hegemony military doctrine. "All ships concentrate fire on the Resistance flagship," he ordered. "If we can break their coordination, they'll fall apart." 20 hegemony vessels turned their weapons toward Marcus's ship and unleashed concentrated fire that should have vaporized it instantly. But the other Resistance ships moved to intercept the energy beams, while Kira and the other Luminari channeled healing energy to repair damage faster than it could accumulate. The flagship's hull glowed with Luminari markings as the aliens on board shared their life force to keep the ship intact. Marcus felt their strength flowing through his bond with Kira and realized that the entire fleet was now connected in a web of mutual support that made them nearly indestructible. "Return fire," Marcus ordered, and every Resistance ship responded simultaneously. The coordinated attack overwhelmed the remaining hegemony vessels, and Commander Thale's flagship exploded in a brilliant flash that marked the end of organized enemy resistance in the system. With the orbital defenses neutralized, the Resistance fleet moved toward the planet's surface to begin liberation operations. Transport ships landed at prison complexes, while bonded pairs provided cover and coordination for the rescue teams. Marcus and Kira led one of the surface operations and found conditions even worse than they had expected. Thousands of beings from dozens of species were packed into overcrowded facilities with minimal food and medical care. Many showed signs of experimentation and torture that would take years to heal. But when the freed prisoners saw Luminari working alongside humans in bonds of mutual support, their despair began to transform into hope. The sight of their former captors' victims now fighting as equals with another species gave them strength to believe that recovery was possible. The hegemony told us that all species were meant to serve their empire, a rescued alien said to Marcus as they evacuated one of the prison complexes. "But you have shown us something different. You have shown us that different species can choose to help each other instead of conquering each other." Over the following weeks, news of the victory at Corax Prime spread throughout the galaxy. Worlds that had been considering rebellion against hegemony rule now declared independence openly. Other species began seeking out humans to explore the possibility of forming their own bonds of partnership and mutual support. Marcus found himself appointed as an ambassador between humanity and the growing coalition of free worlds. He traveled between systems, helping to establish new resistance cells and teaching others about the power of choosing cooperation over domination. "Do you ever miss the simple life of hauling cargo between systems?" Kira asked him one evening as they watched the sunset from their quarters on the new Resistance capital world. Marcus considered the question while enjoying the warmth of their bond and the knowledge that thousands of beings were free because of choices they had made together. "Sometimes I think about how quiet it was," he admitted. "But I wouldn't trade what we have now for anything. We found something that was worth fighting for. Kira's markings pulsed with contentment as she moved closer to him. We found each other, and that led us to find our purpose. Perhaps that is what the universe intended when it brought us together. Marcus looked out at the stars and thought about all the worlds where humans and other species were learning to work together as partners instead of conquerors or victims. The hegemony still controlled vast territories, but their hold was weakening as more systems joined the growing alliance of free peoples. What had started with a lonely cargo hauler buying what he thought was a companion android had become a revolution that was changing the balance of power across the galaxy. And at the heart of it all was a simple human truth, that no one should have to face the darkness alone. The future held challenges and dangers, but Marcus faced them without fear. He had Kira beside him, and they had shown the galaxy that love and partnership were stronger than hatred and domination. That was a victory worth any price.